was looking at some of the promises that Trump made, and the things that he promised, not all, some, were really wonderful things. You know, he wanted to eliminate federal debt. That's something that we always want, because it allows our nation to be more independent, more financially solvent. It's just obviously better. Unfortunately, the way that Trump generally describes the national debt is as if it is the same as personal debt. Unfortunately, it is not. So I think that there have been some drawbacks to the way that we have handled that. Trump has increased our national debt by 8.3 trillion since the beginning of his term. It's actually the fastest that the dollar debt has grown. His debt isn't the most, but it definitely has grown the fastest of any president that we've had. I hope that, you know, we're suddenly going to see a turnaround in some of these policies, and maybe a slightly different tax plan that could somehow change this. Instead of eliminating the federal debt, we are now $23 trillion in debt, an 8.3 trillion increase. So it's not exactly what we were hoping. Trump also made a promise to protect Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Those are really important programs that keep millions of Americans afloat. It is incredibly important that we remember to make sure that our nation as a whole is a decent nation to live in. You know, when you see nations start to crumble, it's when you see huge wealth disparities and extreme poverty. And we avoid this by having simple safety net that we have. We have Social Security, we have Medicare, and we have Medicaid. It doesn't cover everybody, but it covers many, many people. And Trump knew this, and he promised that he was not going to cut it. He was not going to dig into those programs, because everybody knows those programs are helpful. America is more pleasant to live in for everyone. You know, when you have countries where the social safety net is completely gone, then you see people dying on the streets, and it's just that disparity can almost make it miserable for everybody. But unfortunately, with this latest budget, most people saw it as a bit of a failure. Unfortunately, we are now having to cut into those programs. He also did say that he was going to build a wall and make sure that Mexico paid for it. Mexico's like, no, we're not going to pay for that. I hope that he doesn't make America into a third world country by getting people too upset and creating another world war, so that Mexico does build a wall to keep us out and pay for it. But like, the likelihood of me including that is slim to none, don't worry. I understand why it's so exciting to some people. It is, you know, it's a physical barrier to show we are going to protect ourselves, keep the American concept in our borders. But what they don't realize is that statistically, most illegal immigrants actually get here on planes or through boats. The cartel has tunnels that are miles and miles long with these little railroads, and you sit in a little railway car and it scoots you across the border with all sorts of illegal things. So building a wall doesn't really cut into that issue. We do actually have a wall in many areas. We have barriers, we have structures, and I think that doing that at strategic points is not only a good idea, but it's necessary. But we kind of have that at this point, and technology has allowed us to expand that so that we are able to limit the amount of people that are really coming in and out, because a huge portion of our illegal immigrant population are actually just people who overstayed their visas, kind of like Melania did. Maybe Trump just is annoyed by his wife and he just wants her to have to leave. So all this illegal immigration thing is just get the old ball and chain off. I'm just kidding. Melania's beautiful. It is true that she did overstay her visa and had the wrong type of visa because she did not have a work visa when she was working, blah, blah, blah. Honestly, it's not my concern. I actually know that Bernie Sanders would be able to deal with our immigration problem in a more organic and effective way. Because right now we have so many immigrants coming up from Venezuela. We have immigrants who are moving because of drug cartels. They are moving because of intolerable circumstances. They know that we're putting kids in cages. They know that people are dying in our custody and they're still coming. So that tells you what sort of circumstance they're running from. Bernie Sanders has the best understanding of foreign affairs. He has never been caught in a gotcha not understanding a issue fully, and he really has a full plan to deal with each country that we're trying to deal with right now. This is about Trump's plan, so not to completely go into that, but I think that a huge part of controlling this immigration issue is helping to stop trying to put a Band-Aid where we need stitches. You know, it's such a small temporary fix, and we just have the blood that's still just gushing, where if we can fix the actual wound, our Band-Aid would protect it. I hear people say, oh my gosh, you guys don't want borders at all, but I don't know where that's coming from. So I think it is a very good idea to have borders, but I think that a really important part about having strong borders is preventing the crisis before it happens. For example, when Obama was in office, he actually deported tons of people. He was very aggressive. But our crisis at the border has grown considerably. And you might wonder, why has this crisis suddenly, gotten so huge, especially when we've had multiple presidents who have been very, very strong against it. Well, I'm tired of people saying that we don't have the money, because we do have the money. We're wasting huge amounts of money in many, many different areas with absolutely no oversight. And we're not funding the areas of the government like the IRS, which, yes, nobody likes. I mean, I don't like them either. But they're supposed to be able to audit the government and say, hey, we're just throwing money out into the ether over here, and there are certain parts of government that are actually corrupt, where, government workers are funneling government money to contractors that are making a ton of money doing work that the government does not really need. Unfortunately, a large part of that is the military-industrial complex. I've already covered that I support the troops, but that is unfortunately a problem. And people conflate that problem with, do you support the troops or not? And I think that's not fair to the troops or really to anyone. He also talked about getting rid of insurance limitations, like, oh, your insurance will only help you in one state, or your insurance will only let you go to one doctor, in network, out of network. Well, that is literally Bernie's Medicare for All plan. I did a whole video on it, on how you don't have to worry about that funding. I'm sure I'll do another video that kind of visits the funding more in depth. But I mean, Trump wanted to do the same thing. Unfortunately, he has not done that. It would be wonderful if he could. He talked about how, the health insurance agencies are gouging the American public. He's talked about how drug prices are out of control. Medicare for All gives us collective bargaining power against the pharmaceutical companies. But unfortunately, this wonderful promise we have not seen develop in our country as of yet. So I just hope you know that Bernie Sanders does actually have a plan for these promises. So Trump, he had a lot of really awesome ideas during the election. He actually said that he wanted to ban foreign lobbyists from lobbying to raise money for elections. And that's a brilliant idea. The hilarious part of it is this Les Parnas guy who's in the media right now is actually being prosecuted for being in that sort of business and having ties to the Rudy Giuliani Trump Ukraine scandal. I'm not going to relitigate that here because here I want to focus on the future. Trump promised us energy independence from other countries. Now, many people believe that this maybe war that we're getting in with Iran and all of the struggles in Saudi Arabia are or on behalf of Saudi Arabia, I guess, for the most part, because we depend on oil. And we do give huge tax subsidies to our oil companies. At this point in time, the amount of oil we've already pulled up out of the world has the ability to heat our climate many, many times more than what we want. Totally separate issue. But at this point, the best way to get energy independence is by taking those tax subsidies away from the fossil fuel companies and giving them to companies that are helping to provide other renewable resources, renewable ways of getting us the energy that we need. Bernie has a wonderful goal to take away that money from the gas companies and move it to make affordable alternative, energy for our country and make us truly independent. Like Trump, that was a wonderful idea. Unfortunately, we don't have that, and that is causing a lot of our issues in the Middle East. And you know how expensive these wars in the Middle East are? You know how much money we could save if we pulled ourselves out of these wars that supposedly are for their own good? Being the policeman of the playground can be wonderful, but you have to make sure that you're feeding the starving child first, who is in your corner before you go everywhere else. So anyways, that was a wonderful idea, and I think that Bernie Sanders can move us toward achieving it. I also love that Trump promised to reform mental health programs. This opioid crisis that we're seeing sweep our nation, it's killing our young ones. It's killing people my age. It's killing our celebrities. People are dying. The life expectancy of my generation is lower than that of my parents. And this is the first time that has happened in, I think, medical history. The way that drugs have gripped our nation has crippled us on so many fronts. It is escalating crime because addicts are forced into lives of crime by substance pains and inner mental demons that the average person can't even begin to comprehend and understand. And without reforming our mental health programs, and I believe that addiction should absolutely be, addiction care should be a part of that reform. Right now, we do not provide the type of support that we should to be able to end this crisis. Right now, if somebody wants to get out of addiction, get out of the streets, get out of a gang, get out of these things that are making it so that America is dying. Right now, if you want to get out of your situation, you don't have the resources. You have to fight for those resources. And everything in the world is holding you back from them. You know, I'm not afraid to say that I rely on my counselor to see me through many, many different situations. And I absolutely struggled to get the insurance that I needed. It was a fight. It was quite a fight. And I have seen how much mental health can be helped when you allow professionals to come into your life. But for people who haven't, they're not going to want to fight the way that I had to fight to get myself in a situation where I had that support. And I love that Trump said we should reform mental health. Unfortunately, we have not. So now I think that turning to our Medicare for all is the answer for that. No other program has been even close to fighting the complexity of our drug epidemic. There is no other program that has been put forth that can help mental health the way that we obviously need to have it supported. No matter what you think the reason for school shootings are, mental health is a part of it, and school shootings have run rampant. I believe that there are other issues involved as well, but I do believe that mental health is crucial right now. We're living in a sick society. We're all sick just from living in a society that's so sick, you know? I believe it was Mark Twain who said that being able to remain normal in a crazy society is not really normalcy at all. I totally butchered that, but I think it actually is important to have all of us do a little soul searching and realize that we need sweeping reform, and Medicare for All is the only plan that can address that. So even if we didn't have a healthcare crisis, which we do, even if we didn't, just to help fight the opioid epidemic, the drug crisis, to help fight gangs, to help fight violence, to help fight mass shootings and school shootings, we need Medicare for All. And Bernie Sanders is the only politician who is really, really, really consistently fought for it for years on end. Now, I'm not saying that other politicians we have is not continuing to fight for it. You know, I am not putting anybody down. I'm just saying that he is the OG. So we need the OG right now. Trump did promise to eliminate wasteful spending in the first 100 days. And I'm like, that is amazing. Wasteful spending has made us believe we have to tighten our budget where we don't want to support kids in their education, you know, but we're like, hey, let's go build a fighter jet that we're going to sit down and never, ever, ever use during peacetime. I think the military should be funded. I feel like that we should not unilaterally cut back on military spending, because I think the troops, they need to be fairly compensated, and I think their medical, you know, bills need to be covered. Think their futures need to be covered. I think that they need to be taken care of because they are Americans. They are our troops. And some of the extra toys that we're spending tons of money to help our defense contractors become some of the most powerful companies in our country, that money should maybe be reallocated to where we're helping Americans as a whole. Corporations are not people. Corporations are made up of people, but they don't have the morality of a person. Because the way that corporations are set up, they have a fiduciary duty to make the largest profit that can be made. A fiduciary duty is a legal term basically saying that legally your only goal, the most important thing, is that you make as much money as possible for this person, for the entity. So we need to make sure that these funds, which are limited, are used for Americans and American lives instead of the corporate clockwork that we all run around. Even the top dogs, we're still being run through it. You know, this is not against CEOs. They are Americans as well. I also was very surprised when I saw that Trump wanted to ensure that there was funding for HBCs and other colleges and other places where you can grow the American mind, learning institutions. That's so important. HBCs are historically Black colleges, so it's basically, you know, funding education. Unfortunately, our latest budget decisions have shown that this was a promise that was not kept. But Bernie Sanders has a wonderful plan for financing colleges, and he has actually been one of the candidates who has been in contact with different, you know, HBCs and has really worked with them, because he has recognized that that's an important area to focus our education dollars on, because they have historically been left out in education grants and funding. I have a video on College for All and how Bernie plans to pay for it, and guess what? It's not out of, you know, the budget just randomly pulling it from Medicare for All and Social Security. He actually has specific ways to pay for it. So Trump had a great promise and Bernie can keep it. So that's awesome, right? Because I mean, that at the end of the day, we just want the promises kept, right? We don't have to sit here and hate. I'm not going to sit here and spend a lot of time hating. Well, what I do behind closed doors might be a little different, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time just yelling at the world at how we didn't get these promises, but let's see what promises were made, what's good, and let's go ahead and make a better America tomorrow. And Bernie Sanders, he's showing us how we can take these words of wisdom from none other than Trump himself and actually build a better America.